Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Be encouraged. Where are the Beatitudes found? Ronnie says Matthew 5. Do y'all agree or disagree? Oh, Carolyn begs to differ, Ronnie. Matthew 5. So, of course, 8 of them are there. That's what we actually know as the Beatitudes. But Dan, in trying to do a book, needed some more, so he went throughout the New Testament. No, they are also Beatitudes, but they're not the ones found in Matthew chapter 5. So the one today is in John 11. If y'all want to turn over there, we'll look at that. A Beatitude that is not in Matthew chapter 5. John 11, Matthew 5. Yeah, chapter 9, be encouraged. Huh? Well, maybe it is. Maybe I'm mistaken. It's never happened before, but I mean, it could have happened for the very first time ever. Yeah. Amy, I didn't ask nothing of you now. We don't need nothing from... Yeah, I wasn't going to say it, but you did. All right, Matthew 11 is what I meant. I was trying to keep y'all on your toes. Good job, Ronnie and Carolyn. So what's going on? Of course, as John the Baptist is, he's done his ministry well, and he's preached, and many people have come out and been converted by him. And y'all remember what puts him in prison?
He preached against
King Herod. And so King Herod has taken for himself a wife, his brother's wife, or ex-wife, if you will, and has, of course, no biblical scriptural right to do so, and John calls him out on it. Calls him out on it publicly, and he doesn't like that too much, and actually what happens is the dance and all that, but anyway, is it his wife, I guess, that actually has him put in prison because of that. And so he's in prison, and while in prison, think about that, he's facing death, and so I think he wants to make absolutely sure. He sends his disciples out to ask Jesus, are you the one, talking about the Messiah, or should we look for another? And I think that he's got some doubt there. I believe that indicates that. And so the lesson here is about being encouraged. I'm sure he's discouraged. He's been put in prison because of what he believes and what he's been doing. He's facing death. And so he wants to make absolutely sure that Jesus is the right one. Being his cousin, knowing him, I'm really sure that this is the right one. And so they come and they ask the question to Jesus, his disciples do, are you the Messiah, or should we look for another? And Jesus tells them what? Go back and tell John of the miracles that you've seen. Go back and tell them that the blind can see, the lame can walk, the poor have the gospel preached to them, so on and so forth. And then, our beatitude in verse 6 in Matthew 11, blessed is the one who is not offended by me. And so this is talking about the one who is not rejecting Jesus, one that sees him as the Messiah and has faith that he is the Messiah is what this is talking about. Blessed is the one who basically has not been discouraged by me being the Messiah and is looking for another, because that's what several of them were doing. Jesus was a common man. Jesus was a carpenter's son. Jesus came from Bethlehem, the little town of Bethlehem. Jesus was associating with those who were poor and those who were rejects. He was not associating with those of the religious elite. He did not meet the people's standard and criteria for what the Messiah was supposed to be. So that's where this beatitude comes from. Blessed is the one who is not offended by the fact that I do not meet their expectations of what they thought I was supposed to be as the Messiah. So this is what this is talking about here. Study starter questions to get the ball rolling this morning. Number one, what is the difference between disappointment and discouragement? Anybody? Not everybody at once. Hilda, ladies first.
of trying and trying. And then disappointment is when you do something or somebody else does something and it does not work out the way
Let
it
you
was
down.
intended.
Right. So that's well put. So disappointment is when someone or something lets us down. It's a disappointment to us. Somebody has not lived up to their expectations, or something has not been what we thought that it was going to be, whether it's an event or a ministry or a person. And so I'm disappointed. I'm let down because that is not what I thought it was going to be. Whereas discouragement is when, how would you define that? Discouragement maybe is the feeling that is carried out by that disappointment, maybe.
You have a disappointment, and over time, you get discouraged.
Right.
Disappointments are like little blings, and then discouragement comes from that.
Yes, discouragement, I think, is maybe a lack of zeal and enthusiasm that comes from that disappointment. Does that make sense?
You got a feeling of despair because you face these obstacles, whatever the obstacle may be, and you get down and out because of that.
All right, so if you put your trust in somebody or something and that thing does let you down no matter what it is, then are you going to be on fire about that? Whether it's a ball team or it's work or it's, of course, church, whatever it is. And so discouragement comes from being disappointed and then letting that damper our spirits and kill our zeal and enthusiasm, basically is what that is. Number 2, read Matthew 11, 1 through 6. Why was John the Baptist in prison? What happened to him? I think we just answered that, so we will skip that. Number 3, read Matthew 11, 1 through 6 again. I tell you what, who wants to read Matthew 11, 1 through 6? It won't take but a minute, and that's what a lot of this is about anyway, so. Not John 11, Matthew 11. Anybody? Anybody besides Wayne?
No, I'm already over here.
Okay.
1 through 6.
Now it came to pass, when Jesus finished commanding his 12 disciples, that he departed from there to teach and to preach in their cities. And when John had heard in prison about the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples and said to him, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and tell John the things which you hear and see. The blind see and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who is not offended because of me." As they departed, Jesus began to say to the multitudes concerning John, "What did you go into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind?
Okay. Yes, 1 through 6.
I went a little further.
You good? Thank you. All right, so number 3, reading that, with which do you think John struggled when he asked Jesus, "Are you the one who is coming, or should we look for another?" Was it A, disappointment, B, discouragement, or C, both? Hilda says both. All right, well, Dan says this. Dan Winkler says he was disappointed as implied in the second part of the question, shall we look for another? I don't see that myself. I don't think he was disappointed in Jesus. I really don't. I think that he was in prison awaiting execution, and he wanted to make absolutely sure that Jesus was the right one. I don't think he was necessarily disappointed in Jesus. So, sorry, I disagree with that, but I'm just giving you the author's answer here. And also, he says he was also discouraged, as implied by the first part of his question, "Are you the one who is to come?" I do think he was discouraged. I don't think that that's the question that indicates that. I'm sorry that I sometimes disagree. I've got a mind of my own. And I realize that the answer that the author gives is the correct answer because he's the author. But I think the discouragement came from a man sitting in a jail cell awaiting execution, for crying out loud. I think he was more disappointed in that than Jesus himself, just wanting to make absolutely sure. All right, turn in your Bibles to 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Any comments about John and that situation?
I was gonna say, Mark, that I think that it's
Who
kind
gave
of,
him a mic?
hey, that's Robert's fault. But I think that, if you're going to die, I want to make sure I'm dying for right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's I think he's valid in that. And, as far as just kind of, hey, I'm willing to go die. He was willing to go die. He was willing to do it. But hey, let's just double check and make sure, and then I'll finish it out with glory and, do everything I need to do. So.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. So you're agreeing with me. Well, that's okay. Talk more often.
Another thing for me is, if you remember when, he finally was gonna have to go behead him, that king didn't really want to do that.
Right.
I mean, he was like, oh man, I wished I hadn't agreed to this. So he wasn't necessarily.
He felt pressure from his better half, but that
Yes.
never happens, does it?
No, but.
All the ladies are looking at me. I'm going to get it.
So, but I'm wondering if he was really worried about dying because the king didn't really want to kill him. Because
I think he was still
was
worried about
afraid
dying,
he was probably worried about dying, but the king didn't really want to do that because he was scared. He was
John
Yeah.
probably knew,
Yeah,
who was the boss there, though.
well,
I mean, after all, he was in prison because he gave in to her,
yeah, oh, well, that's
wanting
true.
him to be in prison. So, 2 Corinthians chapter 11. But that's good input, Ronnie. If I disagree with somebody, and I wasn't saying I necessarily disagree with you, it does not mean that it's not good input. And you can disagree with me, Amy. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, 24 through 29. Who would like to read that? Paul talking about, there's people complaining about what they're having to go through for the cause of Christ, and Paul kind of putting people in their place somewhat, saying, look, let me tell you what I've been through. And it's to do so to sympathize with them. What we're talking about is being discouraged here, and in this context, he's talking about people being discouraged because of suffering the loss of things because of their faith in Jesus Christ. And he's saying, okay, hey, I can be sympathetic towards your plight because after all, and then let's read. After all, this is what's happened to me. So beginning in verse 24. Anybody? All right, I'll take this one. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. That's, of course, according to the Jewish law, the whole minus 1 there. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I've been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils of the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and toil and sleeplessness, often in hunger and thirst, in fasting, often in cold and in nakedness, besides the other things, what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. And then he asked, well, who is weak? Am I not weak? Do I not also struggle? They look at the Apostle Paul, fully inspired by the Holy Spirit, being the man that he was, and saying, well, you don't deal with this discouragement like we do. He's saying, that's what he means by, am I not also weak? Yeah, I deal with this as well. Who is weak? Am I not weak? Who is made to stumble? And I do not burn with indignation. In other words, do you not think that I'm angry at mistreatment towards us because we're Christians, because we're followers of Jesus Christ? And so the whole thing is Paul is saying, don't get discouraged because it happens to me too. It happens to everyone. And I think that's something that we need to remind ourselves of when we get discouraged for whatever reason in the faith, is that everybody, no matter who they are, no matter how long they've been a Christian, how much Bible they know, how strong they've been throughout the years, everybody deals with discouragement. And of course, he talks about ways to work through that, but we need to know that we're not alone. and beat ourselves up and think, man, I've got such a weak faith. I wish I was like so-and-so. They're so strong in the faith. Oh, no. I don't care who that so-and-so is. They struggle also. And so remind yourself of that.
I think that verse you always get in Hebrews chapter 11, that last part of it, there's that good part, but then there's that bad part, like
the
being
outcome
in
of your
prison,
faith.
getting sawn in two and all that stuff. I think that's just a perfect example of when you're in faith, if you have the faith like you're supposed to, and you're going to get discouraged because all this stuff is happening to you. And just to your point, that's what he's saying. Don't think you're alone
Right.
in this. Look at these Hebrew.
And the outcome's not always a pleasant one.
Right. You may have, consequences. You may die.
That's a very good point. So Paul is pointing out, Ronnie's talking about Hebrews 11, and it talks about all the triumphant outcomes of faith and all the different individuals he mentions there. And then he says, then there are some that have been sown in two and pierced through with a sword, and on he goes. In other words, the outcome of your faith is not always positive in this world. And so not only do other people experience discouragement from faith, but sometimes the outcome here is not a pleasant one. And yet we still have to be willing to go through that because it's going to be well worth it one day. And the Hebrew writer talks about that as well. And I think Paul's alluding to that here as well. I'm the Apostle Paul. I don't think he means that in a bragging way, in an arrogant way, but look at what I've been through. You think I get special treatment because of who I am? Let's read the first part of this under introduction. There is an English proverb that says every path has its puddle. Puddle? Sometimes my path feels is more like a pothole. Yeah, somebody else read. I need a break, obviously. Anybody want to read that under introduction? Anybody else besides Ronnie? No, I'm just messing with you, Ronnie. I try to give everybody an opportunity is what I'm doing, Ronnie.
With people trying to avoid me or drive over me, we're told not to grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. But what about the times we're so give out, all we want to do is to give up? Haven't you ever been broken, disappointed, and discouraged? That's where we find John the Baptist when he sent a question to Jesus from prison. Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? Jesus' reply offered him some encouragement, and in doing so, we find the ninth attitude he wants us to be. Blessed is the one who is not offended by me.
Sometimes it just doesn't roll off the tongue right? Good job. Number one there, the definition of encouragement. Discouragement is a word that in the Greek that is found 6 times throughout your New Testament. It means to lose heart. That's all it means. And so whatever causes us to do that, it's different with different people. Obviously, it might be somebody that let you down, might be a sin that you gave into. It could be, a death, a sickness. It can be anything. Whatever makes you to lose heart and maybe slack off and not being as committed to Jesus as we should be. Who wants to read that next section? We're not going to read every bit of this, of course, but in order to go through looking at the definition of this beatitude, we need to read this couple of paragraphs there. Anybody want to read that? I've been told that successful man, so it's under the definition of encouragement. Those couple of paragraphs, and then we'll let Dan break it down for us.
I've been told that the successful man lengthens his stride when he sees that the signpost has deceived him. The failure looks for a place to sit down. Well, there have been many times in my life that I find myself sitting down, and I wasn't sure I'd ever want to get up again. That's discouragement, and it looks like that's what John was going through when he asked Jesus, "Are you the one?" John's "are you" question is very much like the "why me" question we ask. That makes our Lord's response to John as relevant as it is intriguing. He really didn't give John an answer. He offered John his be encouraged beatitude.
All right, thank you. That is right. I mean, he didn't really give an answer. He said, hey, you go back and say what's going, tell what you've seen, and that's the answer in and of itself. And so number one, blessed is the one. I'm not going to read all of that, but skipping down there a little bit, it says, Jesus did something different, something better when John was down in the mouth. He said, think of all the people who have been blessed because of something you started as the voice of one crying in the wilderness. And so what did Jesus do there for John, through his disciples, obviously carrying the message back, but what did Jesus do for John there that would have caused him to be encouraged? Exactly, precisely. Be encouraged at what you've done. Don't think that it's a waste. Don't think that what you've done doesn't matter. I mean, after all, what you've done is great. And there's a lot of people coming to me because as a result of that. And so maybe a couple of things to learn from this. If we're trying to encourage somebody else, maybe recalling some of the things that that person has done in ways, good things that they have done and what they have meant to us in a positive way. Have you ever had a friend come to you and be down in the dumps and you try to encourage them by saying, listen, I love you. Do you realize that you're the reason why I fill in the blank? You know, and let them know that, hey, you make a difference and you've made a difference in the past and you can continue to make a difference. So that's a word of encouragement. If we're dealing with someone who's dealing with discouragement, remind them of things that they have done as well. Now, I think the flip side of that is maybe sometimes needing to remind ourselves, not obviously in an arrogant way, but that, hey, what I do does matter. Maybe take yourself back to a time to where maybe you were stronger in the faith and reminding yourself that I can be that way again. Does that make sense? You know, I was that way one time. I'm not going to let this, what happened, you know, to the attitude, I'm not going to let this get me down, you know? Nowadays, it seems like people are so ready to throw in the towel about anything. Maybe it's just me, but it just seems like our culture, you know. But maybe remind yourself of that. Hebrews 3:13 is a good passage along these lines that talk about coming together and the importance of that. 12 and 13, Hebrews 3, 12 and 13, beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. That also can be discouragement, not just unbelief. Unbelief is a lack of faith. It's not just talking about, you flip from I believe that Jesus is the Son of God to not believing. That's not what that's talking about necessarily. It means a lack of faith. And so you think, well, I still believe in God, that you still might be struggling in your faith, though, to follow Him. But it says, verse 13, but exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So it's talking about how one of the ways to deal with discouragement is how, according to that. Well, the importance of fellowship. The importance of, we had a boat trip this past week before Thursday. I think, what is the deal with the churches doing just a bunch of fun things? I've actually had people, not here, but in the past, ask, you know, there seems to be a lot more just fun, happy-go-lucky activities in the church today. And as if they had a problem with that. And, well, why do we do that? And you know what I say? Fellowship. Yeah. Well, y'all just going and having fun, man. You know, well, I think if all we ever do is fellowship and we don't actually try to be salt and light and have ministry, trying to bring people to Christ and do benevolence and evangelism, there's something wrong with that. There's also something wrong with all business and no fun. Wouldn't you say? And fellowship is not just going back there and eating a meal. And I think for years and years the church thought that's what fellowship is. It's defined as a potluck. That is, but going to the Martinez's, had a good time, had some good food, going on that boat trip last week, having the trunk or treat. Read the article that I put in your bulletin today on trunk or treat. I've had negativity expressed to me about trunk or treat. Once again, not here, but a couple other places. And this is basically what I tell people, is what you'll read in the bulletin. It's called fellowship. Is that not what 12 and 13 is talking about? Is it not easy to get discouraged when you're in your work and maybe family members that are turning against God and temptation and on and on and on? You turn on the television set, it's negativity and it's sinful behavior, and we get discouraged, every one of us. And so it says daily, come up, exhort one another daily. That implies relationship, right? That does not just talking about now Hebrews chapter 10, 24 and 25, where it talks about neglecting the coming together of ourselves. That has to do with an assembly there in a worship service and the encouragement that comes from that. And it's saying don't neglect that. This has to do with relationship. Have a relationship within the church, your church family, so that you can encourage one another. And I think that we all have that. If you do not, then I want to encourage you to get to know your brethren better outside this building and worship services.
Trips we have, the Golden Road Runners. The primary purpose of that is to get to know one another better and to have.
I thought it was to eat.
Well,
Where's Scott at? He's teaching, isn't he?
yeah, if you ask God, it's to eat. That's
So it's the
all
ongoing
important.
joke, in case y'all don't know, FYI, which I shouldn't be telling what happens on the Roadrunner trip, supposed to stay on it. But Scott is our guy that is he is most concerned about food. The question always, Wilma, is where are we going to eat? Are we going to eat here first? Are we going to have an appetizer before we go there? Well, what about dessert? On the way home, can we hit, a spot for dessert? But what Ronnie's saying is to get to know each other better, to maybe put down our guards and relax around each other. And we all have different personalities and different things going on in our life. And when we meet outside a place of worship and have a fun activity, we kind of put down those guards and we cut up with each other, and we end up getting to know each other a little bit better. Then we feel a little bit more relaxed to talk to each other about the problems that we have. Therefore, fulfilling the passage that Hebrews chapter 3 is talking about in verse 13, to encourage one another. Do you feel comfortable enough to come up to somebody you don't know and you only see 1 hour out of every week here and you never really talk to, and spill your guts to them about something you're dealing with? Anybody want to do that? No. And it's not just walking up there in front of everybody doing it. It's doing that to one another, of course.
Mark, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about how we get discouraged thinking that we're the only ones going through something. But the fellowship allows us to understand that we're not the only ones going through something. And it goes back to the relationships.
Thank you. Yeah, when you have fellowship with one another, relationship with one another, you'll find out if you're discouraged about something. A lot of times we're not letting people know that. They may or may not see it, but we're not just letting that. We put on the mask. I think we all do to some degree, like everything's hunky-dory, everything's all right. But what David is saying is when we're around each other, you start seeing that I'm not the only one with problems. That's not to say I look at everybody's problems. That probably came out wrong. I mean, sometimes people share a struggle that they're going through on the bus as we go somewhere or out, and you realize, hello, I'm not the only one with problems. And we want to encourage them. In return, they can encourage us in what we're going through. It's very important. I love to see what we do, what's been growing in the last several years of doing more things together that are fellowship. Any more on blessed is the one? All right, number 2. It just says, who is not offended by me? And so this, he says the word offended translates scandaliza or scandal. And in the verse, it's a passive verb that means John had been given a very negative reputation. And in contrast, Jesus wanted him to know that he had had a positive impact on the lives of many. When people hate us and when they exclude us and revile us and spurn us, spurn our name as evil on account of Jesus, Luke 6:22, it's helpful to remember how much we're appreciated and how many have been blessed by our meager efforts. And we've already talked about that. And so not in a boastful, arrogant kind of way, but sometimes reminding ourselves of those things. Anybody on that before we go over some of the questions? Any inputs? Appreciate the comments. What do you think? In Hebrews 12, we find the word discouragement, New King James Version, or faint-hearted, ESV, twice in verse 3 and 5. What are some of the other words or phrases in the chapter for feelings that might accompany discouragement? Hearts that grow weary or faint, either one. Verse 12, hands that are drooping, hanging down, depending on translation, means the same thing, obviously. Verse 12, knees that are feeble and weak. Verse 13, feet that are lame, dislocated. What translation's that? Is it? Are you making this up as you go? All right, and verse 13, feeling all out. Yeah, he says of joint, but disabled, yeah, rather than healed, okay. Feeling out of all sorts? Huh, I've not heard that one actually. Yeah, out of sorts, okay. Feeling out of sorts, I have heard that. All right, number 2, so that was 5-minute bell. Number 2, demonstration of someone who has encouraged Jesus, who was discouraged, Jesus being that example. Think about Job for a minute, or Elijah, or Jesus. Job said, I wish I'd never been born. So all of these, once again, are great men of faith. Elijah said, I just want to die. Jesus said, I feel like I'm going to die, Matthew 26:38. There were times when all 3 of these great men felt discouraged, even Jesus. So then he lays out, some things that we can learn from Jesus dealing with discouragement. It says, what made the difference? What encouraged Jesus to get up and get on with his life? He had, talking about what life he had left. 3 accounts of this event might prove helpful. Talking about, of course, his betrayal and the time there in the garden. So I'm not going to read all 3 of these, but let's just discuss these. Don't have much time anyway. But number 1, according to these accounts right here, Jesus was discouraged. He poured out his feelings to God. And so what did Jesus do when he was discouraged? 1, he's saying he poured out his feelings to God. So there, of course, in the garden, he is talking to God and pouring out his feelings to God. And as he says here, in Philippians 4, 6, and 7, that's what we need to do. And when we do that, what do we experience? Maria, you're just staring at me like. What do we experience, Maria, when we pour our hearts out to God in prayer? Huh? Well, that's part of it, but according to Philippians 4, 7. I wouldn't put anybody on the spot. Peace. Yeah. Be anxious about nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace that surpasses understanding will guard your hearts and minds. I don't know how that works, except for the simple fact that he says it works, and I've experienced it over and over again. I'm sure y'all have as well. So when discouraged, don't dismiss prayer and the power of prayer. Go to God and let him know exactly what you're going through, and just pour your heart out to him. And I believe with all my heart you will experience a peace that you cannot describe.
I do too, and Jesus prayed all the time.
Right.
And asked God, let this cup pass from me. But he knew he had to die for us.
Right.
So
Human side did not necessarily want to go through that. He knew there was a lot of pain and agony and taking on sin and what sin is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
1 Thessalonians 5:17, I believe, is where it says pray without ceasing.
Yes.
So Carolyn was saying we're always supposed to be prayerful, in a prayerful state. Pray. I don't know about y'all, I pray going down the road. I close my eyes, I bow my head. Just so y'all get out of the parking lot before I get in my car. But I do. I pray going down the road. I walk several days a week. I know that's hard to believe looking at my physique, but I do. And man, that's what I do. I think and I pray, those two things. And I walk for about 35, 40 minutes. So just make prayer, a part of your life. And once again, you have to have a relationship with God. It's not, you're not going to experience the peace if you go to God in prayer and you're not trying to live for Him, if you're not committed to Him, if you don't worship Him. Good luck with that. That ain't going to happen. We have to have that relationship. Anybody on that number one about prayer? Amen. All right. Number two, according to those passages that it cites there, Jesus maintained an unwavering faith in God's care. And so he points out, the different translations depending, oh my Father, Abba Father. The point is the relationship, the intimacy. Of course, the Abba Father is Papa, it's translated that. It is a very intimate relationship. It denotes that anyway. It makes that very clear that this is not, it's not somebody who is not close to God. Hence, you got to have a relationship with Him. And so take care of that relationship also. Anybody on that? The passage there in 1 Peter chapter 5, 6, and 7 that it points out teaches us to toss all our cares to God because He cares for us. So don't think that you're troubling God because you've given in to a temptation once again that you've given into 1,000 times before, or God thinks I'm weak. It just says dump your cares on Him. Number three, according to those passages listed there, Jesus was willing to accept whatever God wanted Him to do. Now that's the hard part. All right, nevertheless, not my will, right? But God's will be done. And I think when we have that relationship with God and we are pouring our hearts out to God, we do experience that peace. And then whatever comes, whatever it is, it's God's will. And you're okay with that, ultimately, I believe, even if it's something that's difficult.